I just had a conversation with our born and raised Netherlands expert, Amber, about her home in Amsterdam. Now, Amber is a true expert on the city with a lifetime of recommendations under her belt, many of which you won't hear anywhere else. We went over the must see spots like the Rijksmuseum and the best local markets, as well as her favorite hidden gems, some Dutch foods to try, skippable areas, and if you're feeling so brave, how to bike like a local. Your Amsterdam trip planning starts right here, so don't go away. Here's a 30-second teaser of the episode.
I really think seeing Amsterdam from the water is like the best way to see the city. Bikes outnumber people, and that's not a lie, it's a fact. So, like, my hack of seeing the museum and its collections at a relatively quiet time is by night. So, the tulip fields, they're not in Amsterdam, but they are pretty popular among tourists. There's a big difference between a coffee shop and a cafe. I think the most famous thing is bitterballen, which are like these fried ragu balls with breadcrumbs around them. They're like the best bottle food.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Travel Lemming podcast, where we talk about the world's best destinations through local voices. I'm your host, Betty Hurd. I'm a senior travel writer, podcaster, and full-time flight attendant based in Los Angeles. Today, we're heading to one of Europe's most charming cities where bikes outnumber people and coffee shops are not what they seem. Before we jump in, don't forget to hit pause and subscribe to the channel and leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps others find the show, and we love your feedback. Joining me is our local Amsterdam expert, a brand new member of our team here at Travel Lemming, who's written some awesome guides to Amsterdam, which you can check out on the website after the episode. So welcome to the show, Amber Vis.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too, and welcome to the show and the Travel Lemming team. So to start, Amber, can you tell us why you are our Amsterdam expert?
Yeah, so I've been living in Amsterdam for the past 7 to 8 years now. So I grew up in the eastern part of the Netherlands, so I'm a born and bred Dutch girl. But I studied here in Amsterdam for 5 years at the University of Amsterdam, and now I live here as a young professional.
Awesome. So what is your day job in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so like I'm a travel writer now. Just started, as you mentioned, for Travel Lemming as a regular contributor, which fills up like a third to half of my time. And the other half, I work in communications for a kind of local consultancy in the public space. And besides that, I make some music, I sing and read a lot. Yeah.
Well, it's so nice to get to know you. So now let's get into the fun part. What are the best things to do in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so I put a lot of thought into this, and I really think seeing Amsterdam from the water is like the best way to see the city. There are multiple ways that you can do this. You could either rent your own boat, which is my personal favorite because it gives you the flexibility of going wherever you want, taking as much time as you need. And if you're not comfortable driving your own boat, you could rent one with a skipper and they'll just drive you around. You could have some drinks, some snacks on the boat and see Amsterdam and the canal houses from the water, which is great. Another way to see Amsterdam from the water is by doing a boat tour. So you have many tours like going around some pretty touristy things, which I would not recommend unless you really want to learn something about the history of the city. But you could also go on a tour with a smaller boat. So I suggest then doing a bottle tour, and a bottle is kind of like this phenomenon we have. Maybe a little bit similar to the Swedish fika, but then it's in the late afternoon, early evening. Before dinner, we have drinks, some snacks, and like have some great fun, like in a cafe or whatever. But you could also do it on a boat, which is great. So I suggest doing that, which is like the best way to see Amsterdam. And maybe a fun fact is as well, like as we're recording this, it's like just a couple of weeks before the Amsterdam Light Festival, which takes place in December. And the best way to see that is from the water. And this festival basically revolves around light sculptures like floating on the water in the canals, which is like really magical at night.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So with those boat tours, is there like a ton of ground to cover with the canals, or do they all go to the same destinations? Like if you went with one tour company versus another, are you pretty much guaranteed to see the major sites around the canals in Amsterdam?
I would say like the more touristy, like basic canal tours, they are definitely going along the same routes. You'll pass Anne Frank's house, some other sites. But I think like if you would go with a skipper or with a smaller tour, they would take you along different routes. But seeing as like the canal belt is kind of like a circle or a spiral, I think most boat tours would definitely pass the same sites.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, when I went to Amsterdam in 2019, we did a boat tour. And because we were very limited on time, so we didn't actually get to go to a bunch of sites. So we just sailed past them. And like you mentioned, we passed the Anne Frank house, which is very cool to see from the outside, but we didn't actually get to go into it, which we'll talk about that attraction in a little bit too. But yeah, I absolutely would recommend it too. As a visitor, it was so much fun to go on a sunset canal
Oh, that's so
cruise.
great that you did that. It's like the best way, especially during
Yeah.
summer. Yeah.
Oh, it was so beautiful. What are some other great things to do in
I
it?
think the second best thing is to see it while cycling. So, like you mentioned, like bikes outnumber people, and that's not a lie, it's a fact. There are actually like lots of bicycles lying around in the canals, just waiting for their owners, never to be seen again. But I would say like cycling around is maybe the most local way to see the city. However, I would suggest that you only rent a bike or something like that when you're confident. If you've cycled before, then that's great, especially if you've cycled before in like a city area, because like the Amsterdam traffic concerning bicycles can get really chaotic and there are a lot of unspoken, unwritten rules. But if you're not that confident, but you know how to cycle, I'd suggest doing a cycling tour. There are like many cycling tours around. You could do one of the center, which I would not recommend because that's better done on foot and too chaotic. But instead, I would suggest doing like a cycling tour of like the hidden gems, or you can find many online. My favorite goes past, which is like a more unknown like architectural style. Not a lot of tourists know about that. And it's kind of similar. I think it inspired Gaudi. You should fact check me on that. Or it's
Oh,
like one
cool.
way or the other. Gaudi was inspired or they were inspired by Gaudi. But yeah, I think that's the best way to see, second best way to see the city if you're confident enough, because it's like cycling in Amsterdam is no joke.
Okay, so if you haven't ridden a bike in 10 years,
Maybe.
maybe change
Yeah.
your mind and
You could ride a bike, but maybe on the
okay.
outskirts, go into the country a little. And okay, so I mentioned seeing it from the water from a boat, seeing it while cycling, but like the great thing about Amsterdam, it's not like New York or London. It's a relatively small city. Like everything in the Netherlands is small. We're a small country, except for the people. They're really tall. But like me. But like the best way to see like most of the sites is just to walk around, because I feel like there's so much in between the major sites. People will go to see the Dam Square or the Red Light District or Anne Frank's house, and maybe they take public transport there and don't see much of like the city along the way, which is a shame because I think the most beautiful parts of Amsterdam are where like locals hang out and it's a little bit quieter. So just walking around is like the perfect way to see the city. But especially walking around in my favorite neighborhood, which is the Pipe. It's kind of an extension of the city center. So you've got like the canal belt with the center a little bit like around it. And then to the south, there's the Pipe, which is like some tourists do find it, but it's especially loved by locals. There are like many shops, restaurants, and it just has a great atmosphere. I always go shopping there or go for brunch or lunch or like drinks, whatever. And if you go there, I'd say the most popular attraction, which some people might know of, is the Albert Kuip market. It's the biggest outdoor market in Europe. And it gets pretty touristy, pretty busy, but I still love going there just to get some fresh produce, or for if you're looking for some like really delicious Dutch food, you could get fresh stroopwafels, which are like these little biscuits with caramel in between, and they make them fresh so they're still warm, which is really good. Yeah.
Sounds so good. Yeah, and we'll talk about food in a little bit as well. But thank you so much for sharing all those awesome things to do. And I want to talk a little bit about museums as well, because I know so many visitors want to go to the major ones that you hear about, like the Van Gogh Museum and the Rijksmuseum. So if you could touch on those a little bit.
Yeah, so the Rijksmuseum, it's the most beautiful museum in the Netherlands, I feel like. So lots of people want to go there, and I think that's valid because it's just so beautiful just to see it from the outside, walk underneath it, and take mirrored pictures of the exterior. It's like the best thing to do. But on the inside, there's over 800 years of Dutch history and art, which I think is one of the best ways to get your feet wet, about Amsterdam, to get to know the city. The most notable artwork is The Night's Watch by Rembrandt van Rijn. But they also have international exhibitions, other Dutch masters like Van Gogh, Vermeer. You can find them all there, which I think is like a really nice thing to do in Amsterdam. And you also have the Van Gogh Museum as well, which you mentioned. I also think this is like a really nice museum to see. I've been there once or twice before, once just like during the day, which I thought was really crowded and really busy. Like the Rijksmuseum, it is a little bit bigger, so people are spread out a little bit more. And some exhibitions see 0 to no people, while Van Gogh Museum is I think, one of the busiest. So like my hack of seeing the museum and its collections at a relatively quiet time is during by night or Van Gogh by night, however you want to pronounce that, which is something that the museum hosts every month. Then there are DJs, there's some workshops which you could do like drawing or photography or some other stuff. There are people who are talking about art. And at the end, there's also a little party in their small club setting, which they have in the museum. But during that entire night, you can walk into the exhibition and see the paintings without the crowds because they only allow a limited number of people, which is, I think, the best way to go to the Van Gogh Museum. But you, of course, have to really plan your trip in advance.
That's such a great local tip. I love that. So you said that that happens once a month at the Van Gogh
Yeah,
Museum,
yeah,
right?
once a month. And I think it
Okay.
doesn't run during summer, but I'm not completely sure. It's more of like a fall, winter type of thing, fall, winter, spring. Yeah.
Okay. Well, definitely something that's worth looking into before
Yeah.
planning your trip. And yeah, when I visited, I went with my parents, and my parents are not museum people at all. And we went to the Rijksmuseum. They had such a great
Mm,
time there, and we were there for like half of an entire day. Even if you're someone who doesn't really like seek out museums, I think it's a really enjoyable thing. And we also went to a Banksy pop-up museum, which was really cool. Banksy's like my favorite street artist. So just lots of awesome museum things going on in Amsterdam that I think a lot of people would appreciate. And even people who might not seek that out, you should definitely look into the museum scene. And I want to touch on the Anne Frank house.
yeah, I've been there once before when I was like in high school. It's like a mandatory thing. We learned a lot about like the Second World War in high school and the Anne Frank house, one of the most important sites to visit in the curriculum. At least when I was a kid, I don't know about like kids nowadays, but it is pretty busy. I think there are like if you're not able to get tickets, it's not too bad. It's interesting to see to learn about her life and to see the back room that she and her family lived in. But if you really want to dig deeper into like Jewish history in Amsterdam or like history of the Second World War, there are many other places you could go to. There's the Resistance Museum, which talks about the Dutch resistance during the Second World War. You could go to the Jewish Museum. But there's also like in the area where I live, which is kind of called the river neighborhood, the Rivierenbuurt, there's the Merwedeplein. And that's the square where Anne Frank used to live before she moved to the safe house. You can't actually visit that house, but you can see her statue on the square, walk around and just like really take in the neighborhood that she used to live in. And if you walk around the neighborhood, you'll see many kind of golden bronze squares on the ground, and that kind of demarcates where Jewish families or other families that got deported used to live in the city, which I think is a more like understated way of learning about the history, just finding those little things and seeing it in the day-to-day life of people who actually live in Amsterdam, how they move through that history. So I think to wrap up, Anne Frank's house is worth visiting if you really want to know more about her life. But if you just want to know more about World War II, what happened under like Nazi occupation, there are other museums that are worth going to, which are maybe a little less crowded and a little less hard to get tickets for.
Very good to know because as an American tourist, really all you hear about is the Anne Frank house. I mean, if you would really dig deeper into the internet and all the other attractions that you can see, I'm sure you could find a list of like Jewish history spots, like you mentioned. But yeah, that's so good to know because really all I ever heard was you have to go to the Anne Frank house. And when we went, I think it was like the lottery system to get the tickets, right? I think when you don't book really, really far ahead in
Might be
advance,
so.
it's like a
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like a lottery thing the day before or the day of. And if you don't refresh the page in time, everybody else snatches up the tickets. So we couldn't even get in. And so that was just such a process. It was really stressful. So we were like, man, I guess we're not going to do it this time. We'll have to come back. But very good to know that if that doesn't work out, there's so many other things to see. So thank you for touching on that. One more thing I want to bring up is the tulips. So I know when people think of Amsterdam, they may think of the tulip gardens, but what I didn't know before I went was that they're not even in the city. They're actually quite a ways outside of Amsterdam. But I went to, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Keukenhof Gardens. And it was such a beautiful experience. But apparently, it's more of a touristy thing than a local thing. So if you could just touch on like the tulip gardens for a moment, that'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
so the tulip fields, they're not in Amsterdam, but they are pretty popular among tourists. I would say they're really beautiful to look at and it's super colorful. I've actually never been there before because like there are more tulip fields than just the Keukenhof. They might not be as big, but they're still really pretty, really colorful. And you can just drive around Amsterdam, like through the little fields and see them outside of your car window. So I'd say if you're really into tulips, they're worthwhile seeing. But if you've only got a limited number of days, I would say explore Amsterdam as well as you can, and maybe go to the beach or like Utrecht or another town and skip tulip fields because they do really get crowded like in peak season, like when they're in bloom. But yeah, if that's like your big dream, like go ahead, see them. No one will stop you, but be aware it's kind of more a touristy thing to do than something for locals. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a tourist trap. I went in April, so they were all in full bloom. To me, it was worth it because tulips are my favorite flower, and it was like I'd always dreamed of seeing that. It was like this postcard vision of Amsterdam. And then again, getting there, they were like, "Oh, it's actually like over an hour drive to get there." And we were like, "Oh man, we gotta take a whole day to do it." But again, for me, I thought it was worth it. I could see how some people might not think it's worth it if they're not like super into botanical gardens or that kind of vibe, but it was really beautiful. But again, just crawling with people, and all of them were tourists. I would say 95% of
Yeah,
them were tourists. So
probably.
you're definitely right about that. So we talked about all these awesome things to do, and I want to ask you what your personal top 3 attractions in Amsterdam
Yeah,
are.
so I've mentioned the Rijksmuseum, which is like one of my favorites. But another favorite of mine, I've actually visited it last weekend, is the Straatmuseum, which translates to street museum. You mentioned Banksy, this is in loving street art. Well, this is really like the street art museum. It's located in the NDSM Wharf, which is in Amsterdam North. So it's a little bit out of the way. Not a lot of tourists go there actually, unless they're really looking for really digging deep into like modern art, street art, that kind of stuff. And the NDSM Wharf used to be a shipyard actually, way back when. And now these silos have been turned into like galleries, creative spaces, and one of them has been turned into the Staat Museum. So the NDSM Wharf itself is full of art, but the Staat Museum is dedicated to street art. So you'll find like larger than life murals. They're huge. They're maybe like two or three above each other in like on the same wall. I think the walls are like 15 meters high or something. And it's just a great experience. And I also think it's like an important part of Amsterdam to visit, especially because subcultures have been like a really big part of Amsterdam history. And they really find like they bloom and flourish there in the NDSM Wharf. Like you'll find lots of artists just doing their thing, people dancing in like kind of underground clubs, or just people sitting by the water in some cool cafe, drinking coffee, like special brew coffee or something, and eating great lunches. I think that's, yeah, one of my favorites. So the NDSM Wharf. So that's the northern part. Like most of the city is located on the southern part of the Het IJ, which is a river that crosses the central station as well. Like if you would leave from central station, you would see Het IJ, which looks more like a lake than a river. And then you could cross that river with a ferry to Noord, or take another ferry, which also goes to Noord, but then to the NDSM Wharf specifically.
Okay, very
Yeah.
cool. And what's your last favorite
Yeah.
attraction?
So also, I think kind of an underestimated part of Amsterdam. It's called Westergas, which is a park, but also the former gasworks, which used to light up the entire city. And now it has been turned into a cultural center. So you'll find galleries there as well. But where the NDSM Wharf, which I mentioned before, is very industrial. This is also industrial, but a little bit more like if you would imagine like Peaky Blinders, a Peaky Blinders set. I don't know if you've seen it, kind of like that, like UK Londonish kind of red brick buildings, really beautiful, like when factories used to be gorgeous, and that located in a park. So there's a lot of green space around, lots of great restaurants, and there are just so many great things to do there. You've got markets, really great activities. They have their own website actually. So if you are like looking for kind of that more local places in Amsterdam, you could look at their website, look at the activities, the calendar they have. There's a stage where artists perform, but there are also like the Fabrique des Lumières, which is a light art installation, which is gorgeous as well. So there's so many things to do. I think that's my final recommendation. Like if you're seeing Amsterdam, like just leave the city center after a while and go to these places, and you'll see a completely different side of the city.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that about Amsterdam, how it does feel small, even though it's the
Mm-hmm.
capital city. I mean, it's so walkable, it's bikeable if you want to go that way. And there's just so much to see, and you can cover a lot of ground in a pretty short amount of time. So Thank you for sharing those local tips. So now, where is the best place to stay for a first timer in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so not a lot of people will like me for saying this neighborhood who actually live there because it's the part of Amsterdam where you'll experience true Amsterdam culture, and it's called the Jordaan, which is part of the city center, but it's a little quieter than like the area around Dam Square, the red light district. It's everything like you would imagine when you picture Amsterdam. So you've got the canals, the bridges, the canal houses, people cycling over the bridges. It's like really beautiful. You've got like lots of brown cafes, which are literally cafes that are completely brown on the inside, and where you can have like bitterballen, which we'll touch upon later, I think, and like a glass of beer or wine. So the great thing about the Jordaan is that it's still in the center, but it's not in the busiest parts. And for a first timer, I think it would be nice to be close to the main sites because you do want to see some of them, like if it's your first time. But it's also close enough to other parts of the city that it's easier kind of to leave the center. Otherwise, it can get a little hard to leave some of the tourist traps around there. But yeah, some people won't like me for saying this because it's like gentrification has been a real problem. So if you go there, just be responsible and conscious about like where you're going, where you're staying, and support local businesses there. I think that's the best way to justify staying in that place.
What about for budget travelers? Do you have any tips for more affordable stays or nearby
Yeah, sure.
alternatives?
So, like, I want to say Amsterdam is a pretty expensive city to stay in. So, I will recommend a neighborhood, but don't be surprised by the prices. Like, they have been going up due to inflation lately. But I would say, like, the best place where you can find some budget hotels, especially because there are hostels like scattered around all neighborhoods, but hotels specifically would be Amstelveen, which is not actually a neighborhood of Amsterdam. It's actually a village located to the south of the city. But like you wouldn't know it's a separate village because it's kind of an extension of the city. It feels like a suburb. So it's a little bit more out of the way, which is probably why hotels are a little cheaper. You'll find like the basic hotels, like the basic standard hotels, Ibis, that tend to be a little cheaper. And but the on the flip side, it is harder to get into the city center. It just takes a little bit longer. You'll have to take public transport. Like the most of Amsterdam is pretty walkable, but to walk to Amsterdam from Amstelveen will take you a longer time, like maybe an hour and a half, which isn't great to start your day with if you're gonna do a lot of walking. But I think like it's still a beautiful place to stay in some parts. Like some parts are more like suburbs. If you stay in the center of Amstelveen, which is like even further out of the way, it is like it has a really beautiful center and some really cute B&Bs and smaller boutique hotels that are affordable.
Great to know. And is there any place that you recommend avoiding in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so I understand like lots of people want to see Dam Square, the red light district, Kalverstraat, but if you're looking for a place to stay, I would not stay there. It's really busy. It's very much catered to tourists, meaning there are some local cute cafes, bars, restaurants to be found if you know where to look. But most of all, like it has a kind of a like seedy feeling. It can feel a little, I wouldn't say dangerous, but just it doesn't feel as comfortable as staying in the other areas. And I also feel like if you're staying there, it's very easy to get stuck in a loop because Amsterdam is like a spiral, like I mentioned before. You would just keep walking in circles. And I also hear people who have been to Amsterdam who did not have a great time. They actually stayed there and got stuck in that very part of the city center and didn't see anything else. So I would say like you could stay in the center, but stay at its borders, but avoid staying in the very, very center unless you know where to go or you're really planning on it, exploring more of Amsterdam as a city as a whole.
So the red light district is right in the center of the city?
Yeah. Yeah. They've actually kind of moved it away from the city center for parts of it because it got too crowded and we suffer from mass tourism, like over tourism a lot in the city center and especially the red light district. So it's actually moved to another part of town where they can actually do their jobs without being stared at by people who won't pay, basically. But yeah, it's in the city center. It's pretty like on a 10-minute, 5-10 minute walk from Central Station, I would say. Yeah. And my like where I used to go to university was actually like just right around the corner. So it's all like small, everything's like very much centered together.
Right. Yeah. Like we've been saying, everything's like pretty walkable and easy to get to. And I remember when I was there, we just stumbled upon the red light district. Like we weren't looking for it. We were just going on a nice
Yeah.
leisurely walk. We were like, oh my God, where are we? And it's such a weird environment because there's like tourists walking around who just came straight from the airport, and they're like going through this neighborhood with their suitcases, but they're just kind of gawking
Yeah.
at people, and it's just it's like the most unique environment I've ever been in, that's for sure. But I know it's like a lot of people want to see that when they visit. Do you think that that's like something that tourists should be more mindful of when they visit Amsterdam because those people are working?
Definitely. I think it's not terrible to walk through it or have a peek, but I also feel like there are lots of coffee shops around the same area, lots of like kind of seedy bars, and many tourists who do go there. I don't like, I wouldn't say all of them because like there are so many different people with different intentions. But there are some people who go to Amsterdam to party and for them to have a great time. Like things they would do would come off as harassment. And yeah, I think like if you're just there, take a peek, don't gawk, and just keep walking. It's fine, but just be mindful of what you're doing and what you're staring at. And if you're not that into like that kind of subculture or scene, anyways, then just skip it and go somewhere else because there's so much to discover. I think it can be very underwhelming. Like it can be overwhelming. Like when I was 12 or 13, I went to Amsterdam for high school as well. And then I just went walking around with a friend and we stumbled upon it as well. We were like shocked. Oh no, how do we get out?
Yeah, I'm sure at 12 it was a little shocking.
But just be respectful. Don't stare for too long or make inappropriate gestures. But I feel like that's basic common sense. But some
Right.
people need,
But a lot of people don't
yeah,
have
some
that.
people need to be reminded sometimes. Yeah.
Of course. And thank you for that reminder. And I think that's a good segue into talking about safety. So some travelers might feel a little skeptical about those certain aspects that give Amsterdam a famous reputation, or maybe infamous to some, like the red light district and maybe the progressive drug scene. So can you touch on those topics and advise on safety in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I think like main precautions apply. Like Amsterdam generally is a very safe city. Those like neighborhoods we talked about, like the red light district, Dam Square, like the main kind of touristy areas, or you could call them tourist traps even. There are a lot of pickpockets there. So be mindful of your stuff when you're walking around. Just keep it in front of you. I've never been robbed there before, but I have felt unsafe just for my stuff, not for my like well-being or whatever. Besides that, in the rest of the city, like don't walk through or cycle through dark parks at night. Like skip Vondelpark when it's dark, unless it's summer and people are still like having drinks in the park. That happens. But just skip that. Don't walk into dark alleyways when you're not familiar with them. In that sense, Amsterdam is very safe. I think what makes it unsafe and gives it sometimes kind of a bad reputation is that there is a progressive drug culture. It's not actually legalized, it's allowed. So the production of drugs, soft drugs, is illegal, but selling it is allowed or legal. But hard drugs, they are like a hard no as well. Like they are completely illegal. And I know like lots of people go there for weed and stuff or like mushrooms, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I would say like if you're planning on doing that kind of stuff, I never do that because I just don't like the way it makes me feel. But
Mm-hmm.
if you are planning on doing that, just make sure there's always another person with you that's sober and can keep an eye on you because accidents do happen. And I feel like that's like one of the main things that make people unsafe or like endangers them, just not knowing how to handle drugs. Like just don't do as much. Like weed can actually have a really bad effect on your brain, can cause psychosis as well. So I would say be really cautious when doing that and traveling to Amsterdam for that. Besides that, some people also just like one of the things that happens a lot when people are like on drugs or under influence or drinking a lot is that they, especially men, because women can't do this, they pee into the canals and then they're so under influence that they fall in and they drown. So that's like something that actually happens. So once again, it's completely under your control because you control like how much that kind of stuff you take in and how much you are under influence. So yeah, just be very mindful of that. Don't walk close to the canals when you're under influence because accidents do happen. And yeah, if you're feeling unsafe and you are under influence, like bar personnel, bartenders, they usually, if you're somewhere out, they're very understanding. They could call a taxi for you to the hotel or whatever. So just take a local and just be like, please, please, please help me. I'm not feeling okay. Can someone take me home? And then let them call a taxi for you. Like I think that's hard to think about under influence, but those kind of things can make it feel a lot safer.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you touched on that. And it's so important to have a plan ahead of time if you do intend to do those things there, because so many people travel to Amsterdam because it's like a dream of theirs to go and do these things that are totally illegal in the States or wherever they're from. So I think a lot of people also go under the impression that they can just take whatever drug and try it for the first time. And then I've heard so many horror stories about things going so badly because people just didn't know how much they could handle and they didn't know how it would affect them, whatever they were trying. So definitely be very cautious. And like you said, have that backup plan and somebody with you. It's just so important to plan if you are going to be taking any
Yeah.
kind of
And maybe
substances.
another good tip would be like if you're planning on doing that, just don't touch hard drugs at all because that's still illegal and could get you at least a hefty fine, or it wouldn't lead straight to jail for you, but probably for the dealer, not for you. But if you're doing like soft drugs, you
Yeah.
can get in a coffee shop. Just ask people who are selling you the drugs like on how to use it and what should I do
Mhm.
when it's my first time, because they know a lot about it and they're like, yeah, they know a lot about it, so they would tell you the main safety precautions you should take. Or yeah, I think that's another great tip.
Of course. Yeah, and so you mentioned coffee shops quite a few times, and I said this in my intro, how coffee shops are not exactly what people might expect them to be. So can you talk about what exactly a coffee shop is in
Yeah,
Amsterdam?
so a there's a big difference between a coffee shop and a cafe. You can actually drink coffee at a coffee shop, but you can also buy weed or other like soft drugs, which would be lighter truffles, mushrooms, I think kind of that kind of stuff, hash, that kind of cannabis. You could still go there, have a beer, and then smoke a joint on the terrace. But a cafe would be like a regular coffee shop, like what you would have in the States, where you would get a coffee or a frappuccino or whatever, get a cup of tea and just read your book or do some work on your laptop or whatever. So there's a big difference. And I think a lot of people mistake that and end up at coffee shops wanting to grab a coffee and then realizing, hey, this place doesn't sell coffee, or it does, but it sells a lot of other things as well.
Oh, yeah. Is there a reason why they're called coffee
I'm
shops?
actually not sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
that's fine if
Yeah.
you don't know. I just was always like, why did that ever
Yeah.
become a
Same.
thing? Yeah, when we were there, my mom said she was like, I need to go to a coffee shop. We need coffee right now. I was like, Mom, you got to stop saying that because I went over it so many
uh,
times.
yeah. I think like it would probably be like something to do with like before it was allowed, you would not get coffee there, but also other stuff. Probably something like that.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
makes sense. Well, thank you for talking about all those safety tips. I think that all of that was very helpful, especially because there's a little bit of a different vibe and some other opportunities that might not be presented in some other major cities in Europe and around the world there. So great to touch on. So now let's go ahead and move on to food. So I used to work actually at a Dutch restaurant all through college. And yeah, so I became very fond of the cuisine and also, I've found it very difficult to find Dutch food, and now I live in Los Angeles where it's like they have every single food you can possibly imagine. And I looked it up, and I think the closest Dutch restaurant to me is like an
Wow.
hour away. So I don't know why it's hard to find Dutch food, but oh my God, I fell in love with it in college, and I went at the end of college with my family, and we feasted on all of the Dutch food for so many days. It was amazing. What are some local dishes and drinks that visitors should try in Amsterdam?
Yeah, so it's so funny that you mentioned that you really like Dutch cuisine because I know a lot of Dutch people who don't like Dutch cuisine, which is why I think it's
Really?
not that common to have it abroad. I guess like some people, like some expats, like Dutch expats, would want to have it at some point. But yeah, it's also very hard to find like true Dutch restaurants, if that makes sense. You can like find Dutch snacks on most menus, but very like genuine Dutch restaurants, they're not that common here either. Just because like we love Italian food, we love Thai food, we love sushi. You know
Yeah.
that like, most of us we make some of these things at home, but never get them at the restaurant. But there are some foods like you could try, and I'll also maybe talk about a restaurant you could try a little later because there are some around where you could try some Dutch cuisine that isn't in this list. But I think the most famous thing is bitterballen, which are like these fried ragu balls with breadcrumbs around them. They're like the best bottle food, which we talked about a little bit earlier, that you could get. They make them like just with meat, regular meat on the inside. They make them vegetarian. I actually used to work at a place called the Ballen Bar, which translates to the Balls Bar. where I fried bitterballen for a living. And yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
that's
and it's actually
amazing.
located in the food hall, and you can still go there. And they have just a regular beef or goat style bitterballen, but they also have like tom kha kai, chorizo, goat cheese, truffle, whatever you want. They're great. And I think another thing people might know, which is not that popular, which people also may not necessarily like some people would like it and others would strongly detest it, is pickled herring. We call it haring, which is basically the literal translation. So it seems like it's raw when you're eating it. You would grab it by its tail and just hold it above your mouth and just bite in it. You'll eat that basically with raw onions or pickles, which we call zuur, which means sour. And I like it, but I didn't like it before. Like when I was younger, I really hated herring because it just feels a little bit slimy. But now I've come to like it. But it's really, really, really fishy. So if you don't like fish, you'll probably won't like pickled herring. But I think what you would like is kibbeling, which is kind of like fish and chips, which is basically fried cod. So it's breaded and then deep fried, and it's just soft. And we eat it with ravigotten sauce, which I actually don't know what's in there, but it's just really good. I've never asked, but it's like kind of this white mayonnaise kind of sauce. It's super good. So I guess like those are basically the more savory snacks you could get, but we're also, I think, I would say we're pretty famous for our sweet snacks. So I've mentioned stroopwafels, which are these waffles filled with caramel. They're very thin and they're the best when they're warm. But we also like around this time when New Year's is coming up, we have oliebollen, which are oil balls, literally translated, but they're just big balls of dough, sometimes with raisins in them, and we fry them and eat them with powdered sugar. And we eat them mostly on like December 31st or the 1st of January. It's like a New Year's snack. I think they're really good. It sounds like really weird to just eat a ball of dough, but trust me, it's really great. I don't know if you've had them
It's
before.
basically a
Yeah,
donut.
yeah. I would say, yeah, maybe it's a donut without the whole.
Kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
similar.
That probably.
Yeah. And is that's totally different from poffertjes, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm saying that right.
yeah,
Probably not. Because that's like a little
yeah,
pancake.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Like we have the regular Dutch pancakes, which you would eat with maybe some caramel or apples or even some savory things like cheese and bacon. But the poffertjes are like the smaller kinds. They're puffy and you would eat them with powdered sugar, which is really good as
Yeah, I definitely think you guys do your
well.
sweets
Yeah,
really well. And I think if you had to choose, you got to have a stroopwafel. Like they're just so, so good.
definitely.
It's like the perfect combination. Like I mentioned briefly, Indonesian
Mm.
food is pretty big. Do you have any recommendations there for Indonesian
Oh,
dishes?
like my favorite is rendang or rendang, which is kind of this beef stew with coconut, which is so good. I always get it. So Indonesian food is pretty popular in the Netherlands because of like the past with colonialism and like some not so great things. But the great thing is that it kind of elevates our array of dishes we can make in the Netherlands. So you'll find a lot of Indonesian warungs where you can get Indonesian food to go. So I would recommend doing that when it's like summer, eat it in the park or taking some food home. So then you should order the rendang definitely. And green beans, stir fried with maybe some tempeh or some red chilies. And my other favorite dish, I don't know actually what it's called, but they're these steamed eggplants and they're super spicy, but they go so well with the rendang. That's just my favorite Indonesian food. And of course, you have spekkoek, which is also like a sweet cake, which I don't usually eat because it's very, very sweet and very, very sticky, but it's really good. And you mentioned the nasi goreng before, which is like the basic thing to eat. Like you can get it at most restaurants. But I think the most popular Indonesian dish here is satay. So you would eat satay with peanut sauce and then maybe some fried green beans on the side. And it's super good.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. And also, I never had fries with mayonnaise
Oh
until
my God.
working at the Dutch restaurant. So now, and I get every time I get fries now, well, I don't have to have it with mayonnaise, but sometimes I just crave it out of nowhere. Are there any cultural etiquette tips travelers should know? Specific cultural notes to take heed of when visiting Amsterdam?
Yeah, I think like we've mentioned the cycling part before, like one of the biggest pet peeves you'll hear from people living in Amsterdam is that tourists walk on the cycling path a lot, which is really, really annoying because we use the bicycle as like a mode of transportation. Like I've mentioned it before as like one of the best ways to see Amsterdam, and you could definitely like cycle around for leisure, but we typically don't do that unless we're like wearing a full sports outfit and going super fast. We wouldn't do that in the city anyway. So we take our bicycle, we go to work with it, to friends or whatever. It's really a mode of transportation. And when people walk on the cycling path, I think one of the most dangerous things to do. So it also kind of ties back into the safety issue. Lots of people don't know like what the cycling path looks like. So I'm here to tell you because it's pretty clear. There's a sidewalk, usually on the right or left side of the road. And then next to the sidewalk, there would be a cycling path, and it's demarcated with like a huge bicycle painted on the separate path. The path often is red as well, or it would just have like a separate line, but the pathway for like pedestrians would be a little bit like raised a little bit. So it's pretty clear that there's a cycling path, and if it's not clear, there would actually be a blue sign with a white bicycle on it. So please be mindful when you're walking, where you're walking, but also look to the left and right because people are going really fast. And if you're just stepping off the sidewalk without looking, you will probably get hit. And also don't assume you've got priority on a zebra crossing because cyclists are the kings and queens of the road. And I am also guilty of this. I never give people on zebra crossings a priority because I'm always in a hurry unless they're already on the zebra crossing. So I would say like be very cautious, but also don't be too scared and cautious. Be bold because otherwise nobody will ever give you priority when crossing the road. And I think it's also important to note this because I often hear tourists find locals either like standoffish, arrogant, or direct, but most of the times it's like because people don't understand like where they should walk, or they will yell at you if you're on the wrong side of the road. They will scare you a little bit. I do that too. Like I just like cycle a little bit too close to people walking on the cycling path just like to let them know you're not supposed to be here. So yeah, if that's what you feel about like local people, maybe look at that first, like how you're behaving in traffic, and then you'll have a great time if you just follow the rules.
That's really good to know, especially because, well, first of all, tourists can be really unaware in the first place if they don't look these things up ahead of time. And like in the States, the pedestrian always has the right of way. So I can see how someone would just be so mindlessly crossing the street like that, thinking that they're fine and then getting into a bad situation because you need to know these things ahead of time. So that's why you're our expert. I'm glad you're here to tell us about
Yeah, and
this.
it's also nice to tell a big audience of this thing because it's a pain for like many of us. I also think like relating to that, like another pet peeve would be like people riding bikes when they're not familiar with a bicycle at all. Like I mentioned before, only rent a bike if you feel confident riding one because like we don't cycle for leisure and there are a lot of unwritten rules. Like some people will just like take over when you're not looking. You really have to stick to your side of the road. There are certain rules with like certain types of crossings, like who has priority. So you really, really have to be confident when riding one and really be conscious of that. It's a daily commute. And if you feel like you don't have like an overview of the situation, just look like 10 times around you before you make a move or whatever, because that's the safest way to avoid any accidents.
Yeah, yeah, and you've definitely touched on that a few times, so I know that you
Yeah.
mean it. Like, people need to be really cautious when they think about riding a
Yeah.
bike in Amsterdam.
Yeah, they should be. Yeah. And I think like the final thing, like Dutch etiquette, like I know in the States it's pretty common to tip a lot in restaurants because people's pay depend on it. In the Netherlands, if that's right, right? Like it's pretty common to tip in restaurants. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Usually people tip like 20% is
Yeah.
what's expected.
So while that's really kind and people will be really happy with American tourists doing that in Dutch restaurants, our pay doesn't really depend on it. Like pay is a little lower when you're working in a restaurant, depending on what restaurant you go to. But if it would be just a regular like walk-in restaurant, like a tip is expected, but it's not 20% like by far. So if you're just getting a coffee, sitting there for a while, like rounding up, if your coffee is like €3.50, for example, rounding up to 4 or 4.50 is like enough. You wouldn't need to tip more than that unless you really like the service, unless you really like the coffee or the place. Tipping isn't really a rule, like it should be 20%. It's more what feels good in the moment. And if you've hated the service, if you hated the food, don't tip at all because that's kind of like a sign telling like we appreciated your service, but service fees are not included in bills. So it is expected that you leave at least a little tip. Like it can be 50 cents, and like the bigger the bill, of course, the bigger the tip. If you've been eating there for the entire night, your bill's like 300 euros, then maybe tip like 10 to 20 euros. That would be, I think, a good point.
Yeah, very good to know. Yeah, it's very different from here, where it's like you're seen as a bad person if you leave less than 20%. Like, even if the service is terrible, it's, oh, okay. They show you the little screen and it's 20, 22, or
Oh,
25%. It's crazy. And we're coming to the end of our episode. And one of my last questions I want to ask you is, when is the best time of year to visit Amsterdam?
yeah. So, and spring is really, really, really the best time to visit Amsterdam because it's a very rainy country, the Netherlands. Fall is really beautiful. You've got like the fall foliage. Winter can be great if there's ice skating around or whatever. But the days get really short and there's just a lot of rain. We've been really lucky this past week, but the weeks before this, it was like 100% chance of rain every single day. So I would say for the best weather, spring, like and May and June preferably would be the best months to go. There's less chance of rain. The weather could be like 20 degrees Celsius, which is like short skirt, short sleeve weather. And you could just be outside all the time, sit on the terrace, experience the terrace culture. And I think also like another great time would be summer, but statistically there's more rain during the summer and it tends to be a little quieter on the local side because people are going on holiday themselves, and it tends to be a little bit more touristy because other people are going on holiday to the Netherlands. So I'd say spring, like May and June, those are my favorite months here to experience in the Netherlands and would be the best time to travel here for sure.
Great. And how long do you think someone should spend to really feel like they experienced Amsterdam?
Yeah, I would say at least 4 days. Like we've mentioned before, it's a small city, but there's just a lot to discover. There are many different neighborhoods who've all got like kind of different identities, personalities. So you already need one day to experience like the full width of activities to do in the city center, if that's what you want. But then you've got the Pipe, you've got the NDSM Wharf I've mentioned, the Jordaan, you've got Westergas, which I've mentioned before as well. But you've also got like lots of other neighborhoods we haven't even touched upon. So to experience all of that would like at least take 4 days. And I also recommend that because I personally like slow travel a little bit more, which will allow you to spend a little bit more time walking around and really sitting down at a cafe, observing life a little bit.
Love that. Yeah, I was there for 5 days. I still feel like I
Mhm.
barely scratched the surface. There was so much more I still wanted to see. So I definitely need to,
Yeah.
especially after talking
Yeah, you
about all of
should.
this. It's been so great. Yeah, it's been so wonderful talking to you about Amsterdam, our local expert. So if you had to sum it all up in a few sentences, what's the ultimate reason someone should visit Amsterdam?
Yeah, so I think Amsterdam has a reputation of being like a party city, but what I think makes it truly great is that it's so multifaceted and diverse. So it's got the party for sure, but it's also got history and culture, and that's what makes it great in my opinion. You've got like very classic architecture, you've got the industrial and trendier part of town. There's just so many great restaurants to try. You've got like Dutch restaurants, like Italian, Japanese, whatever, and they're all just really good. They've got live music from like the bigger venues where you can catch like the big stars, like, Taylor Swift or whatever, to more local places where you can like catch local bands playing. There's art everywhere. Yeah, there's just so much to discover. And I feel like Amsterdam is just a great city to visit for any type of traveler. You can like find anything you want there if you go outside of the city center and explore the rest of the city.
That's perfect. And I completely agree. I think Amsterdam, of all the major European cities, I think it's absolutely a top three destination that if someone was looking to travel to Europe and couldn't really decide where to go, I think this is easily a top contender. There's something for everyone. It's such a charming city, great food, great people. Absolutely in love with Amsterdam. So thank you again for being here today. And it's been so lovely getting to talk to you about your home.
Yeah, likewise. It's been really lovely to
Absolutely.
talk to you as well and meet you. And yeah, it's just always so nice to talk about Amsterdam and just be enthusiastic about it.
Of course. So before we go, remember to visit travellemming.com and type in Amsterdam in the search bar to read all of Amber's Amsterdam guides. And if you enjoyed this episode, again, please make sure to like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating so you don't miss any of our new episodes. Amber, thank you again for sharing your Amsterdam expertise. This was such a fun discussion with you
Yeah,
today.
thanks so much for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We will see you next time on the Travel Lemming podcast.